Hi, everyone. Welcome to Diffusion Digital 2020 and the panel, Big Corporates Can't Innovate in Blockchain. I think this title is meant to be provocative, but I will be provocative even more and say I think it's lazy to say that big corporates can't innovate in blockchain. And we're here to explain why. I'm joined just in time by James Keck from Accenture, Todd McDonald from R3, and Sabine, oh my gosh, your last name just fell off of my brain.
No worries, Brink.
Sabine Brink from Shell. Yeah. So one of two or three, sorry, the Americans are here now. It's kind of early for us, but bear with me as we wake up. Sabine, why don't you go ahead and introduce a little bit about yourself, then Todd, then James.
Sure, I'm happy to start. So first of all, thanks again for inviting me to this panel. And to be able to speak here on this online event. So my name is Sabine Brink, indeed. I lead the blockchain team within Shell. So we are a dedicated team that is really here to advance the blockchain technology throughout Shell and the energy industry. And we're really here to unlock that potential. And like the title says, indeed, big corporates can't innovate in blockchain. A lot of people might think that, but I'm really wanting to say there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in this space. So I look forward to today sharing a bit more about what we've been doing and hopefully change a bit of the manage on that.
Right. And Sabine, you're based in Europe, is that right?
Yes, I'm based out of Amsterdam.
Great. And Todd, why don't you introduce a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi, Todd McDonald, the co-founder and chief product officer at R3. I am coming to you from New York, but more specifically my attic. So R3, I think folks would probably know us from our launch in 2015 as a bank consortium. Fast forward to today, we're an enterprise software company, and we have what is considered one of the leading enterprise blockchain platforms, which is Corda, which is an open source platform, and we have over 300 members of our ecosystem partners, customers, and a lot of those happen to be corporates that have found a way to not just, I think, innovate, but to get to real value with building applications and bootstrapping networks around Corda and other blockchain platforms. And so look forward to speaking about that today.
Thanks. And James.
Yep. Hey everyone, James Keck here with Accenture. Specifically, I'm with Accenture Technology. I lead the product development, kind of product roadmap under our software asset management group. But like the other companies like Shell and R3, very much Accenture as a whole is active in the whole innovation space across different industries, and hope to I guess prove the title wrong.
That's great. And as always, for those who've been watching the conference so far, feel free to drop questions, comments, compliments in the chat function for us. We'll make sure to address them. I said at the outset that I thought it was kind of lazy to say big corporates can't innovate in blockchain. This is something that we've heard for years, I think, anyone that's kind of touched the corporation space. So I guess I first want to open up to the panel and say, assuming that it's true, that big corporates can't innovate in blockchain, so what, right? Why does that matter? Sabine, when we had our earlier discussion, our pre-call, you were talking a little bit about the ecosystem that corporations belong in. So can you address a little bit like why does it matter whether corporations are innovators here in blockchain or not?
Yeah, sure. Happy to touch on that. I think when we're looking at blockchain, right, blockchain is not just a tool for digitalization, something that we implement, right? Blockchain is really a foundational, a changing systematic difference, what we're trying to bring into an industry and to really fundamentally change the way things are operating today or the way that we look at digital in future. And I think because of that, we know very clearly that you need an ecosystem to come with you. So just one of the examples maybe to give here, what Shell's been doing in this ecosystem space is Shell's actually a founder of the Energy Web Foundation. And that is a energy blockchain specific foundation that Shell was a member founder of almost 3 years ago now. And that group is really there to accelerate the energy transition and blockchain in this energy space. And we've come together with 10 companies then, and now I think there's almost more than 100 affiliates actually part of it. And there's a public chain that's launched and live and running now for a year already. So I think, that's just alluding to the ecosystem part of this, is that I think industries and enterprises play quite an important role at actually changing the way an industry is set up from a systematic point of view and actually accelerating that.
That's a great point. Just a question, the Energy Web Foundation is how old?
The Energy Web Foundation is, I think, now 3 or 4 years old. Okay. 4 years, I think. So in that time, it's grown its affiliateships to really a large group of startups, of other energy companies, of investors and banks. And we have an energy web chain, which is actually a live public proof of authority chain that's running live right now as we speak. You can see it on Blockisberg as well.
That's great. Thank you. And James, you had some thoughts as well, perhaps. At Accenture, no doubt, you see a number of different corporations and their approaches to blockchain. Does it matter what they do?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it definitely matters, and kind of, similar to what was just said, is that, these corporate innovations may not look, to the public as, maybe some consumer innovations or products. If Facebook or Amazon releases a new innovative product, it's not that same type of innovation. And going more towards the ecosystem part is, I think, big corporates and organizations really have to fundamentally innovate on the relationships and then kind of what the future business process will be. So I definitely think it is important for, for corporates to be involved, but, as with any technology, there's a, adoption life cycle. So it's kind of what company makes sense at that point for them to get involved. But I definitely think, there's a wide mix, and also there's value kind of each step of the way from when a company does get involved, whether it's a quote unquote innovator or whether, it's an early adopter that, kind of benefits from these marketplaces and these new ecosystems that are already in place.
Then in your experience with the adoption life cycle, you said it varies. Is there an ideal based on your experience of how corporates should approach?
Well, I guess I hate to give like a typical consultant answer, but no, I think it's a case by case basis. It depends on where, what that corporate or what that, I guess, that whole business process, or now if we look maybe that specific industry, where it needs to be and kind of where the problems are. So some, as we know, with any technology, are more advanced than others. So I don't think there's a one size fits all approach to this, or to solving kind of these new fundamental relationships.
Right. And then Todd, R3 is kind of an elder statesman of in the corporate blockchain space. Can you tell us what's changed? How are the corporations still important? Are business priorities what they were when large corporations were looking at blockchain 5 years ago?
Right. So the perspective from old man R3. So when we started, things have moved at both at an incredible pace, but also I think there's been areas where I think we all feel that we can be moving much more quickly. So when we first started, it was really about, can corporations, and in this case, it's interesting for us when we think of corporations as large corporates, not necessarily banks, but from the perspective for today, we can talk about banks included into the corporate space. When we first started, it was merely about, should I care about blockchain at all as a technology initially? We're well beyond that now. So that has been a success for the industry overall. So where we are today is, and I think to the panel around innovation for corporates, honestly, innovation, who cares really? What we see is, and what got us interested and excited about blockchain technology for the enterprise in the beginning was, this is a chance for widespread digital transformation at an industry scale. Mm-hmm. So what we're seeing corporates do is that there's different ways that they can try and affect change, whether it's within their own ecosystem, right? So there's very large corporates out there that have a lot of friction that they can take out of their own ecosystem, whether it's their own supply chain, their own balance sheet, and how they move money around internally, or they're looking to transform entire industries, whether it's within trade, insurance. We're involved in healthcare across a lot of different segments. So I think it's not so much about innovation; it's more of an imperative of digital transformation, and I think everyone's feeling those effects today, and wishing they probably had done a little bit more ahead of 2020. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really what's important, because Sabine mentioned it earlier. Blockchains are only good if they bring an ecosystem, bring a network, and you start to be able to do business in a different way. If you don't have that, then really, what's the point? So you need to bring all that together. And corporates, what we found, are critical to this because they bring the ecosystem when it's right. When it's wrong, then all bets are off.
Right. No, I really like your point about it used to being about technology almost for a tech's sake, and now corporations are looking actually at blockchain towards creating networks at scale, right? Or new marketplaces. I realize I didn't give my background when we started this panel, but I am a partner at Outlier Ventures. But I also led the venture arm of the CME group for many years, and I was at Goldman Sachs for many years. So I've kind of been on both sides of the coin a little bit. So then as we think about the innovations that you do see happening, it's a chance for you guys to talk your own book here, but also, if you don't mind, talk a little bit some about the stumbling blocks you've had.
We're always talking our own book all the time.
How are you innovating? Can you talk about, like, in your opinion, the innovations that you're seeing in the corporations that you're either in or working with that you're most proud of, or you find most intriguing, or that you think will be the most impactful going forward? Sabine, around not just oil and gas, but energy writ large with Shell. Can you talk more specifically about some of the efforts that you guys are going or are undergoing?
Yeah, happy to. So I think, it's a really exciting space, the energy and blockchain space, and I think it's almost under or people don't know enough about what is all going on in the space. It's actually crazy, everything that's happening. If I focus on within Shell, we started a dedicated blockchain team as early as in 2016 already, where we actually within the Shell group said we need a blockchain team to help us accelerate our efforts of this technology throughout Shell and throughout the energy industry. And this has been very powerful for us because not alone did we do loads of proof of concepts, and let's say in those early stages, but we actually came out with a very strong strategy throughout those years that says where we should be focusing blockchain efforts, where it's going to give us value today, but more importantly, also where it's going to give us value tomorrow in especially changing and emerging markets like, decentralized energy, distributed energy, the energy transition that we have, mobility as in another example, carbon. So that's really a wider way on a high level how we see our strategy. If we focus a bit more into core examples of what we've been working on, I alluded to the Energy Web Foundation, which is a fantastic example of, from an infrastructure foundational perspective, the way we address an ecosystem. Another really interesting example that we're working on right now, and we're about to go live with this actually this month, so it's very exciting, is around digital passports for pieces of equipment. And this is really to create full supply chain transparency, where you actually create that digital asset of any piece of equipment or device. And you're actually able to transfer that state or that device between different industry partners that collaborate along your supply chain. And I think this is just one of the examples where we're deploying this through Shell. Also externally, we've got external partners that we work together on this with. So really, that's really right now in the middle of quite a transformation to our as-is processes. Next to that, we've invested in multiple companies like LO3 Energy as well, also in the transactional space. And our trading arm as well, Shell Trading, has created 2 joint ventures in this space as well for really the post-trade settlement processes. So I think across the board, and I hope I bring that across a little bit here, loads of exciting stuff at different stages of maturity going on.
No, that's incredibly exciting. I don't know if you can't divulge too much about the upcoming digital passport, or if there's going to be an actual public announcement, but you mentioned that you are working with other external partners. Are these other corporations or are they startups as well?
Combination. So we have gathered together some of our core supply chain ecosystem to work on with us on this and actually recreate a whole new way of working together within our industry. So that is currently in progress from a corporation perspective, because I don't think it's just about the technology. It's also about bringing this industry together and actually learning how to collaborate in this new way and going through transformational change as an organization to look at this from a decentralized perspective, right? So that's been one of the focus areas, bringing everyone together. And at the same time, we've worked with startups to actually, accelerate the technology advancement and actually get it implemented. And that's a combination of internal technical expertise, but also other startups that we collaborate with.
Right, great. And James, with all the corporations that you are consulting with and working with in the blockchain space, what are some themes? What are some things that have been exciting you about the innovations that they're pursuing?
There's a bunch, and I wouldn't do justice to similar to Shell. We've been in space a long time, and similar to also to Todd on R3, innovating and looking across multiple industries. But recently, we came out a couple good announcements. We worked with Fujitsu on Hyperledger Cactus, which is a blockchain framework for blockchain interoperability and integrations. And then also a hot topic has been, and a very good one currently has been around central bank digital currencies, which we've also worked with R3 and numerous other financial institutions around. But for my specific team, the cool stuff that I see every day is around, we're really reimagining contract management, and then how do we reimagine managing the assets that come from the contracts. So specifically, we look at software contracts and software licenses. So if you look at a big corporation, almost any big corporation, a huge IT spend that they have is around software licenses, software in general. So we're looking on how we can really look at that complete life cycle. So similar to work in the supply chain, where you can trace the transparency and each step of the way of when something's produced. We're trying to do the same thing with software licenses, and then kind of expand that to different industries and kind of different verticals as well. Because in the contract, when you set up a contract for a big purchase, that kind of gives you the fundamental data and I guess building blocks for that contract and those assets in the contract throughout its life cycle. So we're really focused on how do we bring trust and transparency and also just collaboration to the contract process, and then from there take out the actual assets and products that are in the contract to track them and manage them effectively.
Can you? Sorry, I don't mean to.
No.
Poke at your inner nerd, but would you mind? I'm just curious about the assets. When you say you're managing the assets from the contract, are you referring then to tokenization or to something else?
We're currently working at software licenses, and in the future would be tokenizing software licenses, so they could kind of move freely or compliantly, I should say, throughout organizations and kind of bigger corporations. So yeah, it's definitely our first kind of thing is now to understand the contract, get that fundamentally correct, and kind of the management of that, and then from there, look what assets or what products were in that contract and then tokenize and manage properly.
And I'm just curious in general, when you talk about tokenization to any of your corporate clients, do they understand what you're referring to? How much education is required when you bring up the subject?
Yeah, well, I would say it's definitely gotten easier because you don't have to start all the way from blockchain. You still do a little bit, but tokenization, I'm not a nerdy guy or a tech guy, but by any means, but I just try to give analogies of it, what I mean, and really just try to track, whatever asset they want to track is really kind of how I explain it. But no, it's I mean there all are difficulties, but if you describe it as some.
Does anyone see James frozen? Or was that just me?
I think we lost. I think when the internet heard that he was trying to not be a nerd, they cut him off.
Okay. Well,
it's hard to.
Right, here's your lane. Go for it.
All right, I'm gonna burst right in. So so a couple of examples. So maybe I can talk about if there's someone out there within a potentially large corporate is looking for some advice on how to get going and some of the tactics we've seen that have been successful. Maybe I can go over a couple examples. So one way to look at it is like, how can you look to transform something internally? I mentioned before, like there's lots of very large companies out there that have, I imagine from the Shell perspective, it's very similar, where there are some things that within a company you can you can improve quite a bit. So one example is Wells Fargo. So they've been a customer of ours for since the beginning, and they're looking to leverage Corda for an internal network. And so about 6-8 months ago, they announced a project called Wells Fargo Digital Cash, which was really an internal internal cash management system that they're using to help move funds between, in effect, different balance sheets within Wells Fargo. It's a very complex organization, and so they're in effect tokenizing cash within Wells Fargo. But that's internal. I guess the next model would be how can you help spur on innovation or transformation externally by building things internally and then spinning them out. ING is another customer of ours for many years, and they get involved in lots of projects, and some projects with Shell and with others. In a few cases, they are putting direct resources into startups to help them really cross that chasm and get to that, I guess, escape velocity. And there's a company called High Quality Liquid Asset Exchange that is tokenizing high quality liquid assets to help for large institutions, corporates, to be able to optimize their balance sheet by trading these tokens back and forth. And that was really spurred on by ING. They have lots of projects where they work internally and they externalize them. And I guess the last is around driving networks. I think going back to this, how do we figure out a way to get networks to form or maybe transform existing ones? Mm-hmm. So two examples there. One would be, we've been working on a project since 2016, which previously was called Project Voltron, but we had to rebrand it because they're making a movie on the back of that, so it's disappointing. I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did. It's called Contour now. So this was started really as a push from HSBC, which is the largest trade finance bank in the world. They realized that they had a pain point. They figured others would as well. They got this started, but they were really the 800-pound gorilla in the room. So they had to bring in other participants. They brought in Standard Chartered and Citi eventually and BNP, but importantly, other large corporates to create in effect, a documentary credit network, which is now launched in its own entity, and will be really helping to hopefully this time bring trade into the 21st century. And then maybe the last one would be, existing networks. In Italy, we're really pleased to work with a few different groups there. SIA, which is the infrastructure provider in Europe, and ABI Labs, which is really the Banking Association of Italy. And they've created a network in Italy where there's really 80% of the Italian banking system will, by the end of the year, be live on a blockchain network powered by Corda to be able to help with internal reconciliations of Nostro and Vostro accounts. And so I think this is where it gets really interesting. You use new technology, you build new products that are transformed or really suited for a more peer-to-peer network world, but you launch them on either an infrastructure that exists in the case of SIA, or you launch it into an ecosystem that already exists but's not connected, like with Contour. And I think that's where it gets really interesting, because starting from zero, starting totally from scratch is really difficult. It's very powerful, and I think corporates should recognize the power and influence they have. They can bring together these latent ecosystems to really spur something. And I think, I'd love to hear on the Shell perspective, it's probably similar, where you can see these counterparts that you work with, compete with, trade with. How can you bring them together in a balanced enough way where everyone has a voice, but not one entity has an outsized voice?
Go ahead, Sabine.
I'm trying to mute myself. Is that working?
Yeah, we can hear you. Now we can't. No, unmute yourself again.
Yes,
there
it seems like it's going too fast. Here I am. Yes, Todd, great point. I think what you were mentioning there, right? I don't think there's been a technology to date that actually has allowed us to bridge that gap in such a way that we can collaborate in industries across our own industry boundaries, where we don't have data anymore captured in silos, but we actually are able to create that shared level playing field, right? And I think that's going to become the most foundational change in any industry that we work in, be it supply chain, be it in finance, be it in decentralized energy, the way it's set up, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there where we start to, once we have that level playing field, and it's not anymore about the data that is owned without your silos, but what about those services that we can build on top, and how can we connect to different, tap into uncreated value pools or streams, or create completely new markets? That's what I'm personally most excited about in this space. And you're completely right, the trading is a good example. But I also think that the energy transition that we're going through, this technology has a means for us to accelerate that in a faster way that we might not have been able to do before.
Right. And James, welcome back. Todd had joked when you when you admitted you weren't much of a tech person, the tech threw you out. So we apologize, but you froze on our screen.
But I saw the comments. Accenture didn't kick me out. So.
That was in the chat as well, that perhaps you're being too open and Accenture.
Yeah, no, but not by
so then as we look out, I mean, this is a conference about Web 3.0, but let's say if we look out into the future, then what does the ideal corporation look like in this space? James, I'll ask you, and feel free to add some thoughts about what's happening right now in our current environment, because we can look down 7 years in the future, but obviously I think corporations are responding in different ways to coronavirus and its future impact on how they structure their businesses and how they approach risk and new ventures. So what, in your view, what do you think about when you think about innovation in the corporate space and what an ideal corporation looks like in 5+ years?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And, maybe specifically, touch base on a couple of those aspects they talked about, with the current environment that's going on and how that's kind of highlighted certain, I guess, problems or use cases, especially in, supply chain and supply chain transparency, and just, kind of the bottlenecks that have occurred from companies not being, maybe where they needed to be or where they now know they should have been kind of digitally. And as Todd was saying, where digital transformation, I think, is happening at a faster pace, and people realize now in 2020, where they kind of should have been after the fact. But where I see an ideal corporation or a big corporate in the future, it's almost kind of 5-10 years from now, where, and I don't know how popular this view is, but where blockchain's not necessarily the hot topic anymore, and it's really kind of just an underlying, I guess, infrastructure that really powers new business processes that act more seamless, more efficient, and more effective. We're kind of these what I would say were old school headaches of managing contracts or trying to find out where a certain inventory is with a vendor or a supplier, and kind of those, I guess, what are very kind of cumbersome or bulky business processes now, or points of business processes, regardless of what business or corporate you are, really don't exist in the future.
Right. And then, Todd, I loved your points earlier around internal innovation, external innovation, driving new networks, or propelling existing ones. Where do you see that leading then?
So, the future of the corporation, we will see. I think that we've been interested to see how blockchain as software and blockchain powering networks can change the shape of corporations. I do think that it's an incredibly powerful piece of software to drive consortia where the balance of power is more balanced, right? And I think that's what you're seeing in these ecosystems and networks. But I think, to James's point, the success for us in this blockchain space is I guess, in one way, I just rewatched The Usual Suspects over the weekend. So in the movie, it says the devil's greatest trick is to convince the world that he doesn't exist. Our greatest trick for blockchain technology is to sort of forget that it exists and it's just there under the hood. And the biggest thing for us, and I think for corporates, is getting up to the value layer, right? So we're beyond blockchain for the sake of the technology. It's how does it enable a new type of network? And I think, and especially back to Outlier Ventures and some of the things that the group is funding and working on, I think there's some exciting new projects that are going to come out of that. And I think corporates really need to get on the ball, because they might miss the boat overall, because there's going to be quite a bit of change. Who knows what it's going to be, though.
Right. Thank you so much, everyone. I think we have less than a minute left, so I just wanted to thank all of our panelists. I also know that there have been some comments in the chat. I recognize that there's some topics that we haven't gotten to yet, so look forward to continuing the conversation, and I will pass it over then to the next panel. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Thank
you very much.
Thanks, everyone.